Welcome back to another episode of Ingredients for a Better Life. I am DNA Chef Jay, joined weekly by Dr. Robert Nettles, founder and chief medical scientist at Stop and Regrow. Doc, good to see you.
All
As
right,
always,
Chef
how you been?
Jay. Great to see you, my friend.
So let's get right to it. I'm talking to a gentleman on the phone doing our hair regrow hair consult, determine eligibility. Guy says to me, he says, Chef Jay, I used to feel so much more agile and I used to like bounce around and have all this energy, but I have to admit my lifestyle has become a bit more sedentary and I've been leaning towards convenience food because I work a lot. Everyone's working a lot these days. How does this affect hair regrowth? How does my sedentary lifestyle and my eating not so much the foods I should be eating. How is this going to affect my hair regrowth? Was the question. So I said, "Oh, that's a good question for the doctor, right?" Because I guess he's saying that quote he says, "My the inside of me feels a bit syrupy and sluggish, whereas before he was agile and bouncy." So I said, well, that sounds like a medical question for doctor. Then also the second part of that, he says, yeah, my dad used to use Propecia. Do I need to go use Propecia because that's what his dad used? How does this stuff all work? I said, well, let me reach out to Dr. Ray and he can answer that because that sounds like
Oh,
a medical type question.
good question, Chef Jay. And so number one is, I used to feel a certain way and I feel a different way today. And you mentioned it, you alluded to it. So the ingredients that you're made of, the molecules that you're made of, is coming from the foods that you eat. So the food ingredients, and you mentioned that. So if he is eating bad foods, his DNA recipe will be using bad ingredients because you're still going to be making yourself, right? You're going to be making your enzymes, you're going to be making your cells, hair and bone and muscle and heart and everything, but you're making them with poor ingredients. And if you watch the course of people over the course of their life and follow how they eat, and they go through periods of time depending on the life cycle of the cells or the enzymes, it will be reflected in the health of their appearance. So, of course, that makes logical sense that the molecular ingredients from food become the molecular ingredients of yourself. So, are we in essence food? The answer is yes. You are what you eat. You are a reflection, an indication of all the choices that you make throughout the course of the day. And these are the true choices. These are not the choices when you fill in the blank. This is the actual the truth. So the blood work
Yeah.
matters. And the second part of the question, Chef Jay, was
The second part of the
my
question,
dad used Propecia.
yeah,
Should
my
I?
dad. It's a double-sided question at that because it says my dad used Propecia, so am I going to have to use Propecia? How does it all work? But then he goes and says, well, but my grandmother died of cancer, and I saw what the cancer drugs did to her, so I don't believe in prescription medicine. So I said,
Okay, so
whoa, this is
that's a
this is a
lot to
real doozy
unpack.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. That's one for the doctor.
No, but number one, number one, you still need to get blood work, right? So,
Yeah,
so
everyone. Yeah,
all the questions are first going to be answered with the blood work. So the
yes,
blood work will determine, first of all, whether or not you're eligible, right? Second of all, the cause. Third, the type of supplement that's required to be taken daily on earth to provide optimal internal health so that the external cells can optimize. So it just sounds like education. So first question you could ask would be, how well versed in science, right? What is the highest degree of science did you achieve? And that's where you'll find the root cause of this person's problem, Chef Jay. It's education. So without
Yeah.
proper education and understanding, everything is superstition. Everything's on the same level. Everybody tells the similar truths down here, and your truth is just as good as the next door neighbor's truth. And my dad's using Propecia and it's not being successful, right? So the question would be, Chef Jay, is Propecia working for your father? And the answer is
Yeah.
no. So the molecule doesn't work for his father, and then he's worried about cancer in his family. So the
Well,
medicines aren't going to cause cancer. Life causes cancer, and most cells eventually will lead to cancer. That's just life. So does a medicine lead to cancer faster? Very rarely. Very rarely.
well,
Very rarely. And medicines that do, Chef Jay, are not approved by the FDA as safe and effective. The FDA makes sure that, as the person mentioned, the molecules in medicines that can cause cancers are pulled from the studies and are no longer on the shelves 50 years later. The molecules that most of us use in the compounding medical field aren't new. They're just novel approaches, novel uses of older molecules. The good thing about using older molecules, Chef Jay, if they led to problems, you would hear about it after 50 years. Whereas peptide CJF19, FQ, that came from Mars, that everybody's raving about and no pharmaceutical company's ever heard of, first of all, nonsense. But second of all, I'd be more scared of that one, right? I'd be more, I'd feel safer with something that's been through the test and has been used for 50 years with patients.
let's have a quick review of medicine and prescription medicine versus precision medicine for the public, just to clarify the difference for people.
So prescription medicine would be a traditional use of a formula used for a disease, and that methodology probably fell out of use about 2 decades ago, and this is where precision medicine takes over. So in the old scheme of thinking, we considered that every disease would have a pathology that could be treated with a single formula. With precision medicine, we now understand that's incorrect. We understand that the human body is going to respond to the internal biochemistry. So the message comes from the inside, and the DNA inside each cell will respond individually to the surrounding biochemistry inside the bloodstream. So we use a complex algorithm to understand the hormone axis to determine the optimal absolute amounts of each molecule in your bloodstream, and then the optimal ratios, which lead to terminal, not vellus, hair growth, using molecules to optimize the biomarkers that will best give us the outcome that we're looking for in relation to the hair regrowth.
So again, you're talking about the DNA blood test or the biochemical report card, one and the same, is the way that you determine where people stand, their biomarkers and their baseline to move forward and to treat what the cause is. So if it's hair loss, if it's something hormonal, if it's elevated sugars, it's all going to be answered within that blood test that you developed over 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago.
You're
So
right,
I urge people.
Chase.
Yep.
Step one, we need the blood work at the time of the condition of the hair loss. So we need the hormone axis cross-referenced with the nutrition at the time of the hair loss. Yep.
Yep. So yeah, once you find out what is going on inside, then you can treat what the cause, what the problem is. Without knowing what the problem is, how can you fix it? Like anything, right? So it makes sense. Stopandregrow.com, and it's not just in California. It's available anywhere where there's a lab, and those labs are in India. Those labs are in uh, all over the world, Europe, Canada, the U.S. So you're everywhere, Doc. You've gone global, and thankfully, so you're helping a lot of people. I know it worked for me, and I urge everyone to go to stopandregrow.com, book that DNA biochemical report card blood test, and move forward with your life with some vitality and some optimism. That you don't have to be stuck with what your parents or your uncles gave you. It's not that way anymore. So, Doctor, thank you so much for your time and clarification. And I look forward to seeing you next week on Ingredients for a Better Life. Until then, uh, Godspeed and peace and love.
Thank you very much, Chef Jay.
Okay, take care. Bye.